Donald Trump wants to buy Greenland. Why? We bought a lot of land. Alaska, Florida, the Louisiana Purchase. I hope he does buy Greenland, and he calls it the Green New Deal.
Good morning. It's Wednesday, Apollo Wednesday, January the 21st, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have Varney and Company, motivation, meditation, and Apollo. All that and more when I get back. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. Now, Varney and Company.
Davos, Switzerland. It is 11 o'clock Eastern Time. It's Wednesday, January the 21st. This morning, the President addressed the World Economic Forum in Davos. Here we go. He spoke for about an hour and a half. It was a long speech. Much of it was a boast about the U.S. economy. He called it the hottest economy in the world. Then he launched into I would call it sort of holding the Europeans to account. He attacked the Brits for their use of North Sea oil. They're not using it properly, he says. It doesn't like the use of windmills. He calls people who buy them stupid. Then he turned his attention to Greenland and said, look, we need Greenland for its strategic national security. The U.S. alone can protect it. So, he says, immediate negotiations are coming up. They're going on right now on the future of Greenland. He said he will not use force in Greenland. Well, having said all of that, look at the markets. They like what he said up to a point, I guess. It's not to reverse yesterday's red ink, but we're up 460 on the Dow, 288 on the Nasdaq. Big tech mostly higher. There's maybe one loser there. Yes, there is. It's Microsoft, Nvidia, Alphabet, Apple, Amazon up. The 10-year Treasury yield, where's that? It's going down a little, but not much, 4.28%. All right, gold, another new high, I believe, $4,848 an ounce. Now, listen to what President Trump, listen to him touting his economic agenda and America's strength. He lays it on thick. Roll tape.
The USA is the economic engine on the planet, and when America booms, the entire world booms. We've made historic trade deals with partners covering 40% of all U.S. trade. We have countries as our partner, too. The European nations, Japan, South Korea. They're our partners. They've gone into massive deals with us, especially on oil and gas. We want Europe to be strong. Ultimately, these are matters of national security, and perhaps no current issue makes the situation more clear than what's currently going on with Greenland.
Okay, Martha McCallum with us this morning.
And that was Varney and Company. Nonprofit News Now. Back in a minute. Thank you. And a little bit of Maria Bartiromo.
What I think this will really show.
10 years of a conspiracy, but I think it's really interesting to see how he used corporate America to do his dirty work, because it wasn't just AT&T and Verizon that he wanted the phone records. He also sent subpoenas to J.P. Morgan so that J.P. Morgan can send over banking records of President Trump and of Republicans. Now, I asked J.P. Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon about that, and I said, did you send over banking records and debank President Trump? And what Jamie said to me is like, look, we all have to grow up. He said, we follow the law. We got a subpoena. We got a subpoena to send over bank records, and when we get a subpoena, we're going to follow it. So what do you do about that? I mean,
Okay, well, what you do about that is that Jamie Dimon is wrong. He is, Jamie Dimon, this is proof that Jamie Dimon is a Trump hater. And this is why the stock market hasn't been performing as well as it should, because Jamie Dimon keeps dumping stock. He wants to make Donald Trump look as bad as he possibly can. Now, and I'm saying this because Jamie Dimon says, hey, grow up. When we get a subpoena, we have to follow it. He's a liar. He knows that that's not true. You get a subpoena, you can quash. It's a move to quash the subpoena. I'm not an attorney, but I watch Law and Order on a regular basis. And I see on Law and Order that they're out making motions to quash subpoenas all the time. Jamie Dimon's legal department could do the same thing, because Maria Bartiromo is more interested in money than she is in news and getting things right. She missed that. Or she knew that she could ask that question or present that conflict to Jamie Dimon when she talked to him, but she chose not to because she's worried that he won't want to come on her show anymore, and that will somehow hurt her ratings and or her prestige. But the bottom line is, Jamie Dimon lies to everybody when he says you get a subpoena, you have to submit. No, you can make a motion to quash it. And he didn't. Why? Because he hates Donald Trump. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is a a paragraph or two from an article, The Ghost of Media Past. And the essence of the article is that about how the media, it seems late to the game, but how the media has forfeited its credibility and its integrity. Let me see. So let's start from this point. It's about ICE, of course. Let's see. Despite Ross's effort to get out of the way, Good struck him. Ross is the ICE officer. Good is the thug that got shot. Simultaneously, Ross, who had already been dragged 100 yards in a similar incident in a 2025 arrest, pulled out his gun and fired at Good, killing her. It is against this factual backdrop Stanage asked Levitt his question. Stanage is a pretend reporter. Levitt is the representative of the administration. Absent any effort to put things into perspective by providing facts. He claimed Ross had unjustifiably and recklessly killed Good, ignoring any details, exonerating him. Levitt appropriately called Stanage a left-wing hack, only posing as a journalist. Stanage criticized Levitt for claiming ICE was doing everything correctly, suggesting the deaths of 32 people in ICE hands last year and the detention of 170 U.S. citizens indicated otherwise. As Stanage sought to make illegal aliens look like victims, Levitt suggested he did no research to understand why such immigrants represented a danger to America. So, okay, what we've got here is that already Levitt is making a huge mistake by conceding the point. The deaths of 32 people at ICE hands and detention of 170 U.S. citizens, and that she's conceding that. She's conceding that it happened. You don't do that. She's already identified this guy as a left-wing hack. Okay? He's not a journalist. He's just out trying to score political points for his side. So you don't concede anything. He's already made an arbitrary claim. He's making another arbitrary claim. And so you just simply deny it. 32 people in ICE hands and detention of 170 citizens indicate otherwise. What are you babbling about? What are you talking about? That's what she should have said. If he tries to claim there's some kind of report or whatever, you'd simply deny it. There is no such thing. Doesn't exist. Don't concede. There's no reason to do that. Because when you concede the point, then Mr. Stanage is now going to be able to use this concession later on. He's going to come back to her later on saying, you've already admitted that 32 people died in ICE hands and that 170 U.S. citizens were illegally detained. See, so already you're on the back foot. And if you'd simply denied the arbitrary claim, you wouldn't be in that position. So anyways, it is, Levitt goes on to say that Stanage should take the time to interview victims of illegal immigration, etc. And what basically Levitt is doing is saying, well, yes, ICE killed 32 people. Yes, ICE incarcerated 170 U.S. citizens, but it was justified. No, you don't do that. Again, that's stupid, because then they're going to use this admission, this concession, as a weapon against you in the future. So, again, that's the lesson to be learned here. Arbitrary claims are just that. It can be a little bit scary because you're always thinking, well, if I say no, that there isn't 32 people that have died at ICE hands, that Stanage might come up with and say, I've got proof, I've got evidence, that he might have something in his hip pocket. Okay, but the problem is it's another arbitrary claim, because the evidence isn't evidence until all parties agree that it is evidence. Okay, the left likes to make an arbitrary claim. If you challenge them, they'll back it up with another arbitrary claim. If you challenge that, they back it up with yet another arbitrary claim. But you just keep hammering at them, and eventually they're going to run out of gas. And that's the same thing that Levitt should have done. She should have understood that she's being offered an arbitrary claim and that she's under no obligation to substantiate it or to concede to it. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, motivation.
The thing about struggle, the thing about adversity, the thing when no one's around, it's just you and your shadow. What are you going to do, man? When everything says to quit, what keeps you going?
Your brain is the only thing you have, and your brain is talking to you in all kind of ways, and it wants to control you, pull you in these different pockets. If you can't control your own brain, and your brain controls you, you're f***ed. You got to tell your brain where you want to go and how you want to go and how you want to get there. You got to control it. If not, it's over. When you get beat to shit you all the time, your mind wants to go to that nice spot where you're comforted, where you're not trying, where it's easy. It doesn't want to think. You have all these things in the mind, and the mind can only absorb so much. So all the pain that has to go through, it wants to push it away and say, let's not do that. So every day I'm fighting where the mind wants to go. There has to be something so deep in you that drives you.
Oh, I'm wired differently. I didn't start crying. I didn't say, why me? I'm doing good to the world. I'm not hurting anybody. Why me? I'm wired differently. We turn tragedy into triumph. That's what lions do. Lions don't cry. Lions don't give up. Lions don't quit. Lions hunt. That's what we do for a living. If you are a true lion, it does not make a difference what the circumstances is.
It means put your back into it. It means put your will into it. It means put your legs into it. It means keep pushing and keep pushing and keep pushing. It means don't stop until you reach your goal.
I want you to climb the mountain. I don't care what the mountain is. Academic probation, climb it. You done broke up with somebody, climb it. You're gonna be okay. You were diagnosed with something, climb it. You broker than you ever been, climb it. You're not where you want to be, climb it. Whatever your goal is, you keep going till you get there. This will not be the death of us. This test will be our testimony, and this mess will be our message.
And that was a little bit of motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you, Varney and Company, and this is Sidekick talking about a Supreme Court case.
So Lisa Cook fired last summer for alleged mortgage fraud. That was the first time a president tried to remove a Fed governor in the 112-year history of the Federal Reserve. How the 9 justices rule on this case will be a major test of presidential power. Their decision comes down to 2 words: for cause. Under the Federal Reserve Act, governors can only be removed for cause, but that's a term the law never really defined. So the Supreme Court could choose to define it. Cook's case is seen as a key test of how much leeway, if any, they're willing to give Trump in remaking and controlling the U.S. Central Bank.
Okay, so this is an interesting issue. Every branch of government, the 3 branches of government, has their own. They have their own job. They have their own lanes. There's a saying, "Stay in your lane." And the Supreme Court, it's not the Supreme Court's job to define anything in the law. If the law doesn't define what it means, and the definition is necessary in order to enforce the law, then what the Supreme Court should do is simply declare the law unenforceable. The law is unenforceable, and Congress will have to take this up again and define what they mean by for cause. That's the way you do it. Because otherwise, regular citizens are going to be left in the dark. There's a saying in the law, ignorance of the law is no excuse. I can't go into court and say, gee, I didn't know it was illegal to rob a bank. Okay, that doesn't work. Because the laws are public. They're made public. But Supreme Court and other judicial decisions are not made public. You have to get those by subscription. You have to subscribe to LexisNexis, which is the on the internet, or you have to get a subscription to I think it's called Westlaw. When you look at an attorney show and you see the attorney sitting in his office and behind him is this these bookshelves full of books. That's what they are. Those are all about precedent. There are all these little precedents that have been set by. I'm not responsible for all that, but according to lawyers, those decisions have the force of law. That's ridiculous. It can't be that way. You cannot expect me to go or obey laws I don't even know exist. And this is the way it happens when the judicial branch decides to usurp the authority of the legislative branch. That's when we have problems. So no, the Supreme Court should not define anything. Make the decision as to whether or not the law is enforceable. And if it's not, send it back to the legislature. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, Stuart Varney's My Take about Greenland.
The fight over Greenland is escalating, and it is branching out to involve other issues. For example, when Emmanuel Macron suggested France would not be a part of the board of peace to solve global conflict like Gaza, President Trump threatened to impose 200% tariffs on French wine and champagne. Suddenly, Gaza becomes part of the Greenland dispute. Here's another example. An out-of-the-blue post on Truth Social this morning. It said this: shockingly, our brilliant NATO ally, the United Kingdom, is currently planning to give away the island of Diego Garcia, the site of a vital U.S. military base, to Mauritius, and to do so for no reason whatsoever. Let's not get into the weeds over Diego Garcia. Suffice it to say, it is also now part of the Greenland dispute. Now we're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on the legality of emergency tariffs. Chaos is imminent. Just look at the market action. Heavy selling because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. The next few days are crucial. Trump is going to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. So are the European leaders, who the president is hitting with tariffs because they're not on board with America controlling Greenland. The Europeans have to decide what they're going to do. Submit to Trump to get the tariffs off their back or retaliate. France has threatened to bring out what's being called the big trade bazooka, which would sharply restrict trade and investment. For his part, as he was boarding Air Force One, the president said this: just because a boat went there 500 years ago and then left, that doesn't give you title to the property. Well, there is real danger here. Public opinion in Europe is running hard against President Trump. They think he's a bully. Voters over there will be reluctant to make concessions. A knockdown, drag-out fight is possible. A trade war, a nasty personal fight with our allies, and a market that's selling off. Politicians and investors alike are asking the same question: is Greenland worth it? Sakadara Varney just getting started.
And that was Stuart Varney's My Take. And again, as far as Greenland is concerned, I don't get it in terms of the strategic parts of this. And again, I don't think, unless I'm missing something, that Donald Trump understands power. He spends way too much time putting kick me signs on his back, making threats instead of taking action. If you want to raise tariffs on them as a punishment, then do it. Don't threaten to do it. Oh, if you don't do what we want, because people respect power, but they hate to be threatened. So take the action. Another thing that he could possibly do is start closing embassies. Just a thought. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, a little something about framing the argument.
If you answer their question, you already lost. Most questions aren't requests for information. They are frames. They decide guilt and power, and they decide who is explaining themselves. And the trap is this: the moment you answer, you accept the frame. So here are 3 ways to refuse that frame without refusing the person. Number 1, clarify the frame. You might say, before I answer, what are you assuming when you ask that? That forces a hidden accusation into the open. Second, narrow the frame down. You say, are you asking about intent or outcome here? Now they have to choose, and vague attacks will always collapse under choice. Third, flip the frame to process. You might say, what would change for you if I answered that? If they wanted the truth, this moved things forward. If they want control, it exposes it. Here's the rule underneath all of this. You don't lose arguments because you don't have answers. We're losing arguments because we answered the wrong question. Never answer the frame, always control it.
And that was a little bit about framing. Back in a minute. Thank you. So here, there's an article here in the American Thinker, and it's called Democrat Politicians Sacrifice More Pawns. First paragraph. The chairman of the Democrat National Committee recently made 2 comparisons on X, the first suggesting a commonality between the protesters in Iran and those in Minnesota. In Iran, the people are protesting a horribly oppressive totalitarian rule of the mullahs, with as many as 12,000 people being massacred, according to Epoch Times and the exiled Crown Prince. In Minnesota, deranged people are protesting the enforcement of U.S. laws concerning illegal immigration and against the arrest of criminals. Where's the point of the comparison? This is lunacy. No, it isn't. What it is, illustrates the usefulness of the arbitrary claim. It is an arbitrary claim. And one of the nice things about the arbitrary claim is, since no investigation has been done, you make the arbitrary claim ahead of any investigation, then it cannot be supported or refuted. You cannot say it's lunacy because, again, it's arbitrary. Until an investigation is completed, then you will not be able to call it lunacy or say that it's even a lie. Okay, that's the purpose of the arbitrary claim. Create a narrative and try to shape reality. These are people that think that reality is fungible, they can shape reality, and one of the ways they attempt to do so is with the arbitrary claim. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Apollo.
Chapter 29. I hope the guys who thought this up knew what they were doing. The first time anyone had ever thought about using a lunar landing craft as a lifeboat was in 1961, even before the LOR decision had been made. 2 of Grumman's designers, Tom Kelly and Al Muneer, were in the preliminary phases of the design when Muneer had a thought. Suppose something happened on the way out to the moon, Kelly remembered him musing. Could this little machine they were designing bring the command module back? Kelly and Muneer worked through a few calculations. Nothing had been built yet, Kelly recalled, so changing the specifications really didn't cost anything. Planning for the lifeboat option gave you more fuel to land on the moon with, it let you stay on the moon a little bit longer, and it gave you a rescue option. In writing up the specs, Grumman increased some of the quantities on the consumables, and Kelly kept the lifeboat idea in the back of his mind. In 1963, the possibility of using the LEM as a lifeboat came up at North American in the course of building the command module. North American inquired of NASA whether the LEM would have a thrusting capability sufficient to maneuver it with the command module attached. This intrigued Bob Pyland, then acting head of ASPO, who responded with a request that North American look into the possibility of using the LEM to provide a backup in case the SPS failed in translunar flight. Eventually, it was determined that the LEM could function as the source of engine power for a combined LEM and CSM, and, if necessary, push a crippled command module out of lunar orbit and back home. In the Flight Operations Directorate, the lifeboat option had come up in various forms. Glyn Lunny remembered that when he was head of the Flight Dynamics branch in the early 1960s, his guys had started to talk about a lifeboat procedure. It wasn't part of a systematic strategy, Lunny recalled, just another example of their try-everything way. Hey, we've got another engine on the LEM. We ought to know how to use the LEM engine for docked burns. We don't know what for, but who knows? They worked out some procedures and filed them away. The ECOMs had gotten some practice in lifeboat procedures as well. Once during a simulation of lunar orbit, a glitch in the cabin pressure showed up on the ECOM screen just before loss of signal as the spacecraft went around. The ECOM didn't take the hint. When the command module came back around into radio contact 20 minutes later, the flight control team abruptly discovered that the spacecraft cabin pressure had gone to 0, and the astronauts were already buttoned up in their suits to stay alive. The flight controllers used the LEM's oxygen supply to repressurize the CSM. The White team in particular had gotten some relevant lifeboat experience out of Apollo 9. During an Apollo 9 simulation of mini-maxi double-bubble rendezvous, which involved a wide separation between the LEM and CSM, the SimSoup failed the LEM engines, forcing the crew and the flight control team to conduct a rescue in which the command module maneuvered into a rendezvous with the LEM instead of the other way around. Since the orbital characteristics of the two craft meant that the rescue would require 30 hours, and the LEM for Apollo 9 was only an 18-hour spacecraft, the White team had to work out procedures to keep the LEM's astronauts alive. During the Apollo 9 flight itself, the White team gained another useful bit of experience when the lunar module conducted dips burns with the command module attached to test the ability of the LEM to control both spacecraft. Such experiences led to a few procedures that could be pulled off the shelf during Apollo 13. Still, the flight control team had never developed procedures for an accident of the magnitude of 13's. They had imagined losing one of the two oxygen tanks, or a battery, or even the SPS engine. But never had the simulations postulated that the CSM would be completely dead. Surely, everything thought, anything that knocked out both oxygen tanks would also destroy the spacecraft. Apollo 13 brought a change in simulation policy. Fido Dave Reed summarized the new ground rule. They can throw anything at us they want, and we won't object. 1. The problem that preoccupied the MER and the contractors from the time of the accident through the rest of the mission was whether Aquarius had enough oxygen, water, and electricity to sustain life until Apollo 13 could get home. It was known as the consumables problem. Aquarius had been designed to take Lovell and Hayes to the lunar surface, less than 5 hours, remain there for another 33 hours, then rendezvous with the command module, about 2 hours, and still have a 5-hour reserve. A lifetime of 45 hours. Counting from the time the LEM was activated during Apollo 13, the return could take as little as 77 hours or as much as 100, depending on what kind of additional burns were decided upon. The numbers were painfully discrepant. Aquarius had to be operated so that its water, oxygen, and electricity would last at least 70% longer than intended, and perhaps more than twice as long. The specialists on the LEM quickly came to a few basic conclusions. Oxygen was not a problem. To support a lunar landing, the LEM was designed on the assumption that its door would be opened when the astronauts went outside for their EVA, venting all of the cabin's oxygen. For Apollo 13, 2 EVAs had been planned, meaning that the LEM had to carry enough oxygen to repressurize the cabin twice, plus provide enough oxygen for the time that the crew was in the cabin. With that much, plus the safety margin built into the system, Aquarius had plenty of oxygen for the trip home, even with all 3 astronauts drawing on it. Because the LEM used batteries instead of fuel cells, oxygen didn't figure in the calculations about power supply. In contrast, water was a huge problem. The electronics in the spacecraft generated heat that was carried off by glycol circulating through the systems. The warmed glycol was recooled by running it through tubes encased in ice. The ice was made by the cold of space from water supplied by the LEM. As the glycol ran through the pipes, the ice vaporized and boiled away. Every system that remained powered up used water. Aquarius carried 338 pounds of water in its tanks. During the first few hours after the crew moved in, the LEM was consuming water at the rate of 6.3 pounds per hour. Arithmetic immediately revealed that, at that rate of consumption, Aquarius would have no water at all after 54 more hours, 23 fewer hours than the fastest possible return to Earth. The astronauts would survive without water for the extra 23 hours, but the equipment wouldn't. Electrical power was also in short supply. The descent stage of Aquarius had 4 batteries. The ascent stage had 2. From the 6 batteries together, and after subtracting the power that had already been expended in checking out the LEM, the planners on the ground could count on fewer than 2,000 amp-hours of electricity. Ordinarily, the LEM used 50 amps. 2,000 divided by 50 gave only 40 hours. Moreover, they were going to be making extraordinary demands on Aquarius. As the men in the Mir and at Bethpage calculated the maneuvers Aquarius would have to make and the power it would take from the LEM to power up the partially depleted entry batteries in Odyssey, it was decided that Aquarius would somehow have to use a maximum of 15 amps when it was not maneuvering. Until the day of the accident, the LEM's designers had calculated that the LEM's minimal configuration used 20 amps. To conserve water and power, the engineers in the Mir went systematically through the spacecraft, looking at every component to see whether it could be turned off completely. If not, they calculated the lowest voltage at which any given piece of equipment would operate, and the minimal configuration in which a system would continue to perform the functions it absolutely had to perform. Forget the specs, forget the rule books, forget the operations manuals, Arabian announced. Go back to the physics of the design that no one knows better than you. The knowledge that's not written down anywhere, and decide what's the least we can really get away with. For example, the DIPS engine contained an abort sensor assembly, ASA, that monitored its performance. The ASA included small heaters that kept it at 70 degrees Fahrenheit. What would happen if the heaters were turned down so that the fluid in the ASA's gyroscopes was maintained at a few degrees above freezing? Would the ASA still work? There was no time for anyone in the Mir or at Grumman to conduct tests. The answer had to be provided on the basis of the inadequate data at hand. In the case of the ASA, the engineers decided that it should be able to function under those near-freezing conditions, and so the crew was told to turn the heaters down. Everyone hoped for the best. As such questions spread through the support network, often ending in the laps of the people who had originally designed the equipment, cautious engineers were faced with a choice between 2 incompatible demands. Each was sensitive to the critical nature of his own piece of the puzzle. For example, it could be disastrous if the ASA failed to detect a malfunction in the dips during the next burn. The temptation to insist that his piece of equipment be operated within the tolerances for which it had been designed was powerful. And yet each also understood that somehow the voltages and the heat sources in the lunar module had to be cut drastically. Small dramas were played out all over the country as designers passed on the word, usually with too little data to be sure they were right, that their babies would continue to function under the unprecedented conditions that Houston was proposing. This process of redefining the LEM's capability continued throughout the flight as the reserves dwindled and the conditions within the spacecraft kept changing. Years later, John Strakos, a Grumman engineer at Bethpage, would say it was the most intensely concentrated work he'd ever done, an effort that in his memory seemed to last 18 or 20 hours. His handwritten log of his activities reveals that it lasted for what amounted to 3 unbroken days. Bit by bit, the LEM was powered down to 15 amps, and the astronauts, wearing thin clothing designed for a long trip in a confined space at 70 degrees, began to get cold as the temperature dropped below 60 degrees and kept going down. In the process of inventorying the consumables during the first night, someone discovered that, as things stood, the astronauts would asphyxiate from carbon dioxide buildup before they got home. In both the LEM and the command module, carbon dioxide was removed by circulating the air through canisters of lithium hydroxide. The problem was that Aquarius had only 2 such canisters, not nearly enough to last the journey home. Odyssey had plenty of canisters, but they were the wrong size and shape to fit the LEM's equipment. The problem was passed along to the Crew Systems Division. Figure out some way to use the CSM's lithium hydroxide canisters in the LEM. Unless they came up with an answer, none of the rest of the planning was going to make any difference.
And that was Apollo. And next week, more on Apollo 13. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you're not neutral and that the government has no rights.